Hello, friends. Welcome to the More You Know podcast. I'm your host, Brian Yu. If you're always curious and wanting to learn something new, then this podcast is for you. For an hour a week, join me as I learn from people all around the world about their hobbies and interests, and hopefully it will inspire you to do further research on these topics. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right, hello guys. Today we have Hannah Kiefer. I hope I said that right. She's our third guest on the More You Know podcast, and I will let her introduce herself because I think she can do a better job than me.
Yeah, no, you got the name right. It's Hannah Kiefer. So I am I'm a theater teacher. I'm a podcaster. I love storytelling in all shapes and forms, and which ties into my nerdy passion that I'm super into, which kind of ties all my interests together, which is arts integration, which is a thing that I went to college first to be I was going to be a theater teacher in a classroom. I was going to work at a high school and teach drama classes and put on a play every semester. And then I ended up getting a job as a theater teaching artist connected to a performing arts theater, and would go into schools and do workshops. And that's where I really started learning more about arts integration, which is something that became like a huge passion for me. The super basic explanation of that is that it's teaching both an art form and something in the core curriculum at the same time. And this is, a lot of teachers will do something, they'll do something with the arts as a way of teaching the core curriculum, and they'll touch on it a little bit. So like maybe they'll, you'll everybody does, the poster of the life cycle of the frog and do little presentations of poems from reflecting history around the world, that kind of thing. So
Gotcha.
The good teachers will always be incorporating the arts in their curriculum to some form. But what makes arts integration different is that you're not only, it's looking at what standards you're using. How are you measuring how successful you are? And for most teachers, even if they're incorporating art, they're not really evaluating the quality of the art. They're not teaching you how to use color to make a beautiful poster of the life cycle of the frog. They're only looking at, do you know the science?
Like every little fact of it. And I kind of agree. And I actually really agree with this topic. This actually brings me back to when I was in college and just sitting through lectures where professors are just kind of just taking attendance and just doing and just reading off of PowerPoints. And I think this is kind of like what we're touching on, but not a lot of the like education was interactive. They just expected us to learn from the book and not really practice what we preach, really. And
exactly.
And I think that that putting the students through what they're teaching them really gets them to learn it more. Because I had a class where we did have to like practice what we were learning and put it into real world situations, and that did make me learn it better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in your case, art integration, when I first heard it, art is a really broad topic. So can you go a little bit more in depth about like art integration and what you really do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the fun thing is that even though theater is my primary art form, currently my job involves working with teaching artists from all different art forms. So I work with folks on arts integration that involves dance and visual art and music. And so finding basically this can be done with any art form. The only idea is that you need to be teaching both it and the core curriculum together at the same time, and they reinforce each other. So the way that I used it most frequently for theater is one of the most obvious pairings of an art form of the core curriculum ever, which was I did a lot of stuff with theater in English. And so this was a lot of, a lot of English classes already read plays. They'll
Hmm.
read some Shakespeare, they'll read some August Wilson, something like that. And so sometimes they would bring me in to not only just read the plays and talk about it from an English perspective, but to really dig into learning the theater part of it as well, and looking at, working on actually acting, working on scene design, working on something that has
Oh,
that doesn't necessarily have value on the English.
you cut out for 1 sec. It cut you off, and I think I lost you at the part where you were talking about English and how they bring you in and they kind of make you like kind of like act out the scene so students can understand that more. Could you go back to
Yeah,
that point? Yeah, sorry
yeah.
about that.
No worries. Um, since a lot of English classes they read plays, we'll bring this in, we'll come in and work on it not only from an English perspective. Do you understand the language? Do you understand the characters? Can you read for narrative understanding and narrative arc? But also looking at the theater aspects of it, looking at blocking, looking at maybe acting something out, not just myself as a performer, but getting the students to get up and act stuff out as well. And throughout that, looking and evaluating them both on what are they learning from the English side and what are they learning from the theater side. So a lot of teachers that are teaching plays will, they'll have their kids read out loud, they'll maybe have them act out a section, but most of the time they're looking for understanding of the text more than actually teaching theater skills. And with arts integration, the goal is that the two of them together are important and reinforce each other, and that both sides are dealt with. Um,
I kind of
the
wish,
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of wish that now that you're speaking of this, I wish that they did this like when I was in high school
Mm-hmm.
because this brings me back to when I was in high school and we had to read Romeo and Juliet,
Oh yeah.
and the the common way that teachers would kind of like get the students to understand the book better would be us reading it, but they would be reading it to us, which doesn't make any sense really. And then they would
Mm-hmm.
show us the movie. And I think that if we were if we had someone come in and we had someone to read it from the voice of Romeo or Juliet with the emotion,
Mm-hmm.
then I think I would have had a better understanding and more kind of a emotional connection with them.
Absolutely. I actually, one of the arts integration workshops, I didn't get a chance to fully do this because stuff with quarantine, pandemic stuff hit before we really got to make this happen. But one of the projects that I was working on with the school for a while was they studied Romeo and Juliet, and I talked with the teachers about bringing us in specifically to. They always would perform a piece of it, but we were like, okay, so how can we take this one step further? And we were going to have students essentially modernize Romeo and Juliet and take modernized scenes of it, specifically to focus on themes, to focus on how this story applied to us today, maybe how it applied to their social studies classes. What would happen? What would Romeo and Juliet be saying if it was suddenly set in the Revolutionary War? Who would be the two characters? What would be those feuds? And so taking it and saying, okay, so this is both an aspect of English, of looking at thematically what is this saying, and what purpose narratively do the characters serve, and how does that need to change if you transport it to a different era, but also looking at the theater side of this, that you need to still be telling the same story with the same emotions. What emotions are still important to this? How can you still convey the same scene if you do the balcony scene 3 different times in 3 different locations? It's a very different experience, and this is something that there's a long history of Shakespeare being redone in modern settings or in a different period settings. And so it fits right into it's something you could absolutely do in a theater class or in an English class, and it wouldn't be out of place in either.
So when high schools or schools throw their own musicals, are you heavily involved when it comes to like say like a introduction to theater class? And uh have you ever taught people like how to like really get into the scene, like how people and how actors can force themselves to cry?
Mm-hmm.
What really goes into like when you're trying to teach that to students?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've always been curious on like how actors can just sell that they're just crying so good, but they're not actually really sad.
Mhm. There are so many different schools of thought for acting, and some of them are especially difficult to get across to young performers. I teach, I've taught mostly middle school, so we're looking 11, 12-year olds who, uh, first of all, are still figuring out who they are as people,
Yeah.
much less like trying on other personas. But also a lot of adult acting classes lean very heavily into using your own difficult experiences to inform your character, and I find that to be very that can be dangerous to do with kids who
Hmm.
don't yet have they haven't figured out how to protect themselves emotionally. They haven't figured out when is this safe for me to be remembering what this felt like and trying to bring that feeling back up, when is it not. And so there are a couple different schools of thought, and I've done a couple different ones. With younger ones, I tend to lean more heavily um, into watching and mimicking. And so you can there are essentially two different acting schools of thought, one being like outside in and one being inside out. The inside out is the method acting, where like you really have to be this character and then it just comes out of you. And there's definitely some valid stuff to that. There's a lot of really great exercises that are really good for getting you to feel natural in this character. And then there are other schools of thought that are more like, well, if you can imitate the body language of somebody in this position, the emotions will come along with it. And that's also, different actors. You can talk to 100 different professional actors, and they'll all lean more toward one of these two, but they're both very respected schools of thought on how you act. So for younger ones, I tend to lean more toward the outside in, just because it is a little bit safer, it
Hmm.
allows them to do that without having to like dig into trauma of their past, which they are young. Their past is not
Yeah.
far behind them.
Uh,
Like, and especially anything that like they remember well enough to make a mark on them. I don't want to be asking them to dig that up in the middle of an acting class.
oh yeah, that would be.
Um,
Oof.
it's too much. I am not qualified to deal with that for kids. I don't want to put that on anybody. And so we do a lot of watching people and figuring out, okay, physically, what does your face do when you're crying? What, like down to the tiniest details about how
My
your
crying,
forehead scrunches up and
my ugly crying face. Oh.
exactly. And not just watching your own, but watching other people do it. Because again, if you're being an actor, if you're being different characters, you don't just want to be you being sad in all these different characters. You want to think about what is a different way that I can still show this. And so most of the time for young ones, that's where I will land is is having lots of studying other people and trying to mimic that. So I've told students, I've had students stand in front of their mirrors in their bathroom in the morning and just practice looking sad and looking happy, and practice, what does it look like when I cry, what does it look like when I exude excitement from every piece of my body. And a lot of times that it does bring up the emotion in a way that maybe can be realized more fully in older actors who have more tools that they can use. But for younger ones, that's often where I go. I don't teach just solid what's it, art for art's sake is what it's called, when you're just teaching theater or just teaching visual art and not really bringing in any of the core stuff. I teach that some, not as much as I do most of the arts integration, because usually the way that the work that I do is often going into classrooms, and not like after school drama classrooms, but like I will go and work with an English teacher, or I will go and work with a social studies teacher to help them work on, we're going to look at the treatment of Native Americans in and we're going to use theater to uh, bring that really to life, or to really bring that home for the students. So that's the kind of work that I do more, but I do also love teaching just theater on its own. Also great fun.
That's actually really cool that you try to incorporate it with history, because I think that if you actually bring out the actual scenery of history, students will, one, they will be more interested in it instead of just reading it in a really um like a really monotoned way, but just seeing what and bringing the emotions of what happened back in the days during the wars, during all the horrible times in the past, brings a lot of light to, well, not light, brings a lot of like awareness of like what happened more. And I think people would actually start like caring more and understanding more. And I think
Yeah.
that could actually go really good with today, because I feel like not everyone understands what happened in the past and all that. And
Yeah.
that, yeah.
No, absolutely. I think theater in particular is such an amazing tool for the arts overall, but theater in particular requires you to empathize with somebody who is
I
not
was
you.
gonna
Like
say, yeah,
that is the nature of it. And
yeah,
so you have to not only like be able to write down the facts of what happened to this person, but you also have to like understand what that feels like and how they respond when
exactly.
somebody says this to them, and how why that makes them do this next thing they do. And that can be such a powerful tool to connect with stories that maybe are very different from what they know. Even if this is not something that they're ever performing in front of a crowd, just doing the work of having to really think through, why does this character act like this? What are the pieces of their heart and their feelings and their family that bring out this reaction in them that doesn't feel like anything I would do? It's such a great tool for that.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I think empathy, like everyone should learn empathy, and everyone should have a good grasp on empathy, because if you're in the workplace, and I think empathy is just the most important factor when you're in a workplace with people,
Mm.
because some days you can read the room, and then you can make someone's day because you read the room right, because you understand how someone how say your coworker was sad, and then you notice that just from their facial expressions, and you did something nice for them, you're able to make an impact on that person's life.
Absolutely. And even as much as like being able to read, not even just being able to feel empathetic, but being able to read the social cues, theater is so great for that, because again, you're studying people and you're learning,
Yeah,
what does it look like when somebody is sad? What does it look like when somebody is sad but trying not to show it? There's all these, there's you get the subtext where you have to study what this character is saying this, but they really mean this other thing underneath, and you get better at recognizing that in people around you. You suddenly look and realize, oh, I've done that. I've played that character who is saying I'm fine and they're not, and that kind of thing.
yes.
So it's such a great tool for that as well. It's really phenomenal to be able to work through this, especially with like preteens and teenagers. This is such
Start
a
them
great,
young.
yeah,
Start
it's
them
such
young.
a,
Develop them young.
and there's so many emotions going on at that age. So being able to read them for yourself, being able to read them for other people, and being able to see things from other people's perspective, even if that's not where you are, is so vital. And I love being able to tie that into the history classes, into the English classes. Now, not all arts integration, theater and English and history go together really, really well, because history and English are both
Hmm.
about stories, and so is theater.
Yes.
But I also love finding ways to do more outside the box ones. um, so
Hmm.
like I'm working with somebody right now who is a visual artist, and they have one where they do visual art and math together. And specifically, what they're learning, this is for like fourth grade or so, fourth or fifth grade, specifically when they start working on ratio. Because what they do is they take a photo of themselves, and then they try to draw it and to transport it onto a larger canvas. And so they have to do the measuring and figuring out the ratio that they want to get the size they want. Otherwise, their face is going to look wrong. But they also have to do the art and learn how to shade correctly and learn how to use this specific technique to make it happen. And so I love that it can incorporate these two aspects of it, of something that I would not have thought would make sense. Theater and math is a great one too. You can play with. I've done stuff with where you play with set design and proportions within that, because you have to. If you're a designer, or if you're even, being stage manager and marking out where everything should go, you have to have the right proportions of everything, and you have to be exact, and you have to be able to do math quickly and figure out how many people can stand in between these two couches before it looks too crowded. And so there's all kinds of stuff that you can do that really that narrow in on one aspect of the art form as well as one aspect of the core curriculum. And I think it's so exciting to find those two things that go together and be getting kids to design a set for something in the middle of their math class, which is something they never thought that they'd be doing during that time.
So when you do this in like the middle of a math class, do you bring in props or
Oh,
something to help them like visualize it? Or
yeah. What I've done is we'll bring in whatever supplies they need. We'll bring in examples a lot of the times to say, so this is, if I was teaching a set design one, it would be bringing in examples of this is what a ground plan looks like. This is what a designer would get when they were trying to design for something. This is, and maybe show them, so this is how a designer would draw it out and measure it. This is what it would look like on the stage. So they could see how doing the math to figure things out in this way would translate into seeing it up on its feet. And so we bring in whatever we need to do to get them to really understand how does the math that they're doing in this one, what piece of math do they really need to be good at to be able to get it to look the way that they want it to in the end.
interesting. So from doing this more like a interactive learning, have you gotten feedback from any of the teachers saying that the kids really like they learned it, or well, they understood it more?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite things that I've done for the last several years, for several years in a row, I worked with the same middle school, and every spring we'd come back and they'd be learning the book The Outsiders, and so we would
Oh, I
essentially
love that book.
dramatize. Yeah, it's a great book. It's a great middle
Love The
school book.
Outsiders.
Oh, it's so good. And specifically, we would spend a week with them. I'd crash their classes for a week, and we'd dramatize it. So we'd take it, we'd cast it, we'd write scenes from the character's point of view, we'd write monologues from the character's point of view. They designed some costumes and drew them out so that people could say, and had to defend, why does this character wear this color? Why do they dress like this? What makes them look different from the other greaser outfits? And we do a little bit of stage combat, because who doesn't love getting to fake punch your friend in the middle of class?
Oh wow.
So by the end of the week, we would have a couple of different versions of The Outsiders where they would perform for each other. And the feedback that I got from both teachers and from students on how it boosted engagement, on how it boosted their comprehension of it, they could remember more of the characters because they not only read it, but they saw it, and they were it. They were these characters,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to come up with costumes for them, and they had to write scenes for them. And so every year we'd come back, and every year it would be, this is one of the most fun parts of the year, both for just being an interactive thing, but also really letting them dig into this world that especially, middle school boys especially sometimes have trouble connecting to a lot of the literature, because a lot of it doesn't feel like it's for them. And The Outsiders is such a great story for these kids who feel like they don't really belong, for any kid who feels like they don't really belong, and getting a chance to stand up and really act that out helps that sink in even deeper, and understanding the themes of it and understanding what these characters felt. So when it's done right, the teachers love it. And the teachers I know there have been some who I've kind of almost convinced that arts integration is the way to go, like, because
I definitely agree.
It's so great.
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
After thinking about it more, I don't understand why more like middle schoolers or even elementary schoolers don't even incorporate this, like make it mandatory.
And the reason, I mean, it is fairly, it's not new, but it's not as well known as it should be. I went to school to teach theater and didn't know anything about it until afterwards, until 2015. And so a lot of people don't know about it. And a lot of school teachers, since the emphasis is partly on the art, a lot of school teachers don't feel qualified to teach the art part of it. But a lot of, if you, especially if you live anywhere near a big city, a lot of arts organizations and museums and theaters and dance studios will have teaching artists who can go into the schools and do exactly what I did and take a week and say, hey, we're going to do this integration. We're going to use dance to work on math. We're going to use music to work on science, and find all these different ways of incorporating these. I get an opportunity a lot of chances to lead arts integration workshops and to teach local teachers about how this works. And I feel like I keep like just pulling them on into into the circle and being like, no, for real, this is kind of amazing. And one of the things, especially since arts budgets are always the first thing to go in any any education setting, the arts budget
Sad.
gets slashed, and there are so few schools that have even a part-time theater program. They might do like a play once a year, but there are so few schools that have like drama classes as electives and that kind of thing, much less full-time drama. And so this is a really great way to give your students access to the arts without having to sacrifice the core curriculum in any way. Because a lot of teachers are like, how am I going to get all this? We have to get all this ready for the test, and we have to get everything, all of this information has to be learned by them. And arts integration is great because it lets them access the arts while also teaching the core stuff. So it's not like you have to take out a piece of your science curriculum to make space for visual art. You can do both simultaneously and have them learn the science part better than they would have if it had just been on its own, because they have to put it into practice. They have to draw it out, and they have to color it, and they have to really access that kinesthetic learning style, and which for most students is going to be a whole lot more effective than just sitting and listening to a lecture or watching a PowerPoint. So it's such, when teachers understand that it can be done and what resources they need to be able to access this, it can be such a powerful tool.
Interesting. One thing that I was kind of curious on, when you went to college for arts, did they teach you about arts integration a lot, or was it just like one part of it, and then you kind of chose to dive deeper into it and do your own research on it?
Actually, when I went to college, we focused almost entirely on just how to teach theater itself. Now, I went to a very small school, a little private school in the middle of the Midwest, and so it's very possible that I think there were two of us in the theater education program. It was really tiny, so it's very possible that other larger colleges and universities have a more robust understanding of it. But even a lot of those will have maybe like a class on how arts integration works, because they assume that you're going to be teaching only theater or only music, that you're not going to teach any of the other stuff, because why would you?
Hmm.
And so I really truly knew almost nothing about it until I got a job as a teaching artist, and the organization that I worked for primarily did arts integration. And so I learned a lot of it on my feet in the classroom, watching other people do it, and just fell in love with it and started going to workshops and reading up on it and reading other people's suggestions and looking at other people's lesson plans, and learned so much so quickly that now that's part of my job, is taking this idea and helping other teaching artists come up with ways to integrate them, helping teachers come up with ways to integrate them. So it was something that I knew is not as widely taught as I think it should be. I highly think that this needs to be a large part of a lot of any arts education classes and any arts education degree, because it's something that, um, if nothing else, it's a way of making yourself more valuable to the school.
Yeah.
That, if you have to advocate for what you're doing, and a lot of theater teachers do, it's a lot easier to say, look at how I'm supporting the social studies teachers, look at how I'm supporting the science scores, look at how I'm supporting the English classes, and point to that as a reason why your budget should not be the one that gets slashed, why you should remain on board and be teaching the same amount of classes you are. And I think that can be, in addition to just the benefit that it is to kids, I think that's something that, from a selfish perspective, from the teacher, being like, this is good for me and for job security for me, that I can do this and integrate all the way through and be seen as absolutely invaluable to this school because of all the support they're doing of everything else.
Huh. And then that leads me to my next thing. If say like a teacher or any student today wants to learn arts integration. So if I'm a teacher and I want to learn arts integration to make my lessons more interactive, but they don't know anyone or they don't have you there, how can they learn how to effectively integrate this with their lessons and their teachings?
Yes, that is an awesome question. So I have two suggestions. I have one resource and then one place to start if you want to kind of play around with this yourself. So if you're looking for a resource, the Kennedy Center has done amazing work with this. They have arts integrated lessons. They have arts integrated workshops. I'm sure they have a lot of those right now that are virtual, so they're even easier to access for a lot of teachers who maybe can't get to where a live one is happening. But they also have they have so many arts integrated lesson plans and units and explanations and videos and examples that they give you a really great place to start. And as well, I would definitely say check out local arts organizations, even if they're a little further away. Like I've traveled 30-40 minutes to teach in places kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So check with museums, check with theaters, check with dance studios, check with even like if you know there's a band teacher in the next town over, check with them. They might know somebody who does this. A lot of this is from word of mouth, and there will often be, one or two teaching artists serving this huge area, and you might be able to find something that works for what you're looking for. If you want to start planning something on your own, where I always start, where I tell teachers to start, is by looking at the standards. And we're all, classroom teachers are very familiar with the standards for their subject, for their age group. But a lot of times you can get ideas just by going and saying, there are standards for the arts. There are theater standards. There are art standards. And going through and looking through what they're looking at, a lot of that stuff you could say, oh, I can absolutely see how I can teach that. Yeah, I absolutely think that I could teach how to read through a character and read a character's lines and figure out what has happened in their past. Like that's an English standard as well. A lot of them will tie in together. And so if I'm looking for ideas, I know the theater standards better than I know the core curriculum. But if I'm looking for something, I'll go and browse through the standards for the section I know less about. And a lot of times I will land on stuff and say, oh, okay, if I do a little bit of research to make sure I'm getting it right, I bet that I could teach that along with this thing that I know really well and integrate the two together. And that's where I would suggest starting, to just, if you're like, I want to do some theater, maybe I've done some theater in college, but haven't ever taught it and I don't really know where to start. That would be what I would suggest, is go to find the theater standards for your state, for that age group, and look through it. And you might be surprised how easily you can think of, oh, I can see how this would connect to this, and I can see how this would connect to this. And even if it's not, even if you don't feel comfortable teaching full on arts integration with a whole big theater lesson where you're grading them on their presentations, that's okay. The more theater and the more art and the more music you can incorporate is really excellent. I taught dance for one of our sections of Outsiders, and I am not a dancer and I am not a dance teacher, but we've spent some time teaching them popular dances of the 60s. And so I went I watched some YouTube tutorials. And so I was like, okay, so this is what the mashed potato looks like, and I practiced it a bunch, and then brought it back in and taught it to my middle schoolers. And so with a little bit of research and knowing where you're going, you can at least start to do this. It's always great to have a professional teaching artist who does this for a living come in and do a lot of it. But this is absolutely something that I think any teacher can dip their toe into if they want to find a way to really bring some of these subjects home, and as well as giving their kids some arts along the way too.
Interesting. I think, yeah. Do you seem like you have like a very nice grasp of arts integration. Do you do any like online teachings? Do you have a PDF?
We not currently. I'm trying to think if I have anything that um not that I have off the top of my head. I know we frequently will do arts integration stuff through the other place to check would be your any local Office of Education will often have connections to that. That's where we do a lot of our trainings with teachers, is that we'll connect to our local county education office and offer stuff through them. And so, if you're looking for trainings and teachings virtually, I highly recommend the Kennedy Center. They have so much stuff, and a lot of the stuff that I've learned, almost all of it, I would say, I learned from them and from their teaching artists and their teachers. So I'm still, relatively new to this. We've got people who've been over there who've been doing this for like 25 years, who have a much stronger grasp on it. So I would definitely say check there. But also, yeah, for local teachers, an education office they will know the arts organizations that have education departments that can partner with them. They will know where to find teaching artists. They will know where to look for this. And so even if our stuff has been mostly all offered locally. I'm up in Sonoma County in California, but there are a lot of organizations around the country that are starting to learn about this. And if anywhere near you is not, the Kennedy Center has so many options, and so their website is super easy to navigate and super easy to find lots of great stuff on it.
Interesting. Before we wrap this whole thing up, what would be one thing that you'd want people to know? One thing that you would want them to just walk away from this podcast and just say, "Oh wow."
Yeah, I think.
Because I think this whole thing was like a "oh wow" moment to me.
Yeah.
Because this like just you talking about what art integration is made me think back of like my education and what I wish that we could have done, and how I would have been more immersed into the class, and how I would have been more excited to go to class. Really.
Yeah. I mean, I think just the concept of it, I hope people walk away realizing that you can teach both at the same time. And maybe, and for some teachers, I would say also that, obviously this is something I'm passionate about as an arts teacher, but the arts sometimes get undervalued and seen as an extra. And I would argue, I don't think they're extra. I think they are essential. And I think this is an example of of how they can be an essential part and become an essential part of our education, and really make it a deeper and more lasting and more powerful experience for our students. And so I hope that people walk away with this, first of all, knowing that it can happen, and secondly, knowing that it's worth trying, that it's worth making happen, because it absolutely is.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Before we started this, I always thought that art and theater was just like like a blow off thing. But after learning about this today, I'm a total advocate now of saving the theater budget, because this is gonna develop someone for like this is going to develop the young people so well and make them into better empathetic people.
Absolutely.
Where can the listeners find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a podcast of my own. It's called Somebody Write This. It is a storytelling one. I'm a storytelling theater nerd, so this is where I go. The premise is that my co-host and we generate a random plot synopsis, which is usually nonsense, and then spend about 30 minutes trying to flesh that out into a story that could actually exist somewhere. So if you enjoy storytelling and maybe silly storytelling, or if you're looking for some good writing prompts, you can find my podcast, Somebody Write This. We're on Twitter at Write This Pod. And if you want to email me through that, you can always email me through that as well. somebodywritethis@gmail.com. And even if you're writing not about the podcast, but just want to talk arts integration, I could talk about this for like days. So I'm always happy to answer any questions through there as well. But yeah, so that's my podcast. That's my work.
That is awesome. Thank you, Hannah, for coming on to the podcast today. You've really taught me a lot, and I'm very glad that other people are going to know about this too.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to gush about something that I love so much.